What's up, everybody? I'm Thomas J. Bellezza, and welcome to another lesson from The Right Mindset. Today, we are going to go over step 7 on writing a script. The rewrite, your second draft. Some of the things we'll go over today are we'll explore what you should do in your pre-draft, what you should be looking for to edit out problems, and ways to analyze, attack, and clean up your script during the second draft. Let's roll that intro. Today, our lesson is step 7 on writing a script rewrite, second a draft. Before we get into it, remember, if you're a beginner or advanced writer, author, or screenwriter, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. The Right Mindset YouTube channel is for lessons about your craft, analyzing, reviewing, storytelling, and of course, reviews from fellow writers. Let's get right into it. The pre-draft. What is a pre-draft, Thomas? I'm glad you asked. What in tarnation is a pre-draft? Is really what we're thinking. It's the draft you feel from a window before it busts open from a storm. I'm sorry. I like my puns. It's a draft. What's a pre-draft? A pre-draft is a draft you feel from a window before it busts open from a storm. 1 second. I'm hearing from my producers. Okay. No jokes. Got it. We have to move on. What is a pre-draft? This is the point where I won't do a real deep work on my first draft overview. So the pre-draft is before I go into like a deep dive cleanup, I'll actually go through, read, and adjust my first draft again. It's basically my first draft is done, and then before I do the actual second draft, I'll do a pre-draft where I start at the top, I read through, and as I read through, I add and adjust things as needed. So this lets me read and write more or take away as I go through it on a first look without deep analyzing. I'm not trying to fix spelling or anything. This is a rewrite before I do the actual work. I've been, because at this point I've been away for a bit, because I take my break at the end of when I'm finished with my first draft, I take my break. And since I've been away for a bit, I want to feel the story through and add a few changes as it comes to me, because now I'm looking at the story in a new light. I'm seeing it differently. I'm feeling it differently. I'm hearing it differently. And I may not like the dialogue I hear, or I may not like the scene completely, or I'll be like, oh, I realized just reading through without going into a deep analyzation, something is missing here. Let me add it. And it's okay. This will basically be my cleaning up action and dialogue section while adding more or taking away from the scene itself. I'm not putting a lot of effort into the foundation of the narrative, but more so, this is my chance to take another shot at my first draft where I'm just kind of like getting to play with it. All right. 1 second. Boop, 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 boop. How's that look? Good? Okay. All right. Where are we? Once I finish this run through, though, now the real work begins. This is the read and list out the problems part of my rewrite. You're going to have to give yourself a chance to say, this is not working, this is crap, and I like this, but it's for me and not the story. Those are 3 strong elements to create accountability for and really absorb. You have to be willing to accept that this is not working, this is crap, and I really like this, but it's for me, not really the story. This is a for me, but it's not really helping the story. And basically, you got to get ready to take notes on your script as you read through it. Notes are great, but you want to sort them into categories. You don't want to just be random notes all over the place. Go through in stages. This is up to you based on your personal needs. Me, I might do a uh, um, I have two main categories: will take time and quick fix. So if it's something I feel will take a lot of time and needs time, I just put it in that category. If it's a quick fix, mentally, if I am like, this is a quick fix, I'll just do it right there and then. I'll just touch it once kind of mentality. The problem that will take time, or I should say the problems that will take time, are structural, massive plot holes, characterizations being skewed. When you read a scene that it either needs to be taken apart and reconstructed, or you don't know where you stand on a scene, that might be a will need to take time. However, a quick fix problem is something that will be designated to weak dialogue, cleaning up the verbiage, and turning an action block from a ramble into a concise paragraph of action. Traditionally, in a script, you want to have it 4 lines or less. If actions go on and on and on, that's a little dirty. If you have 6 or 7 lines, you can break it up into 4 and 3 or 3 and 4 or whatever, but you don't want to have action blocks kind of going on. It's okay to have several in a row, but you want them to be clean and uniformed. It makes the script so much nicer. But it also helps with your 8th page breakdown and other things like that. Another thing, during the read and list out the problems, your task, you want to read out the will take time parts physically. What is it that you feel makes it a problem? Where does it need work? If it is a plot hole, or you feel it is a plot hole, why? And are there inconsistencies with characters and their choices? The reason you should write out the problems you find is to recognize them as they pop up, or if they pop up at all. Okay? You might discover your concern is answered later on in the script, and that fixes that. Mark out your notes next to the issue, how many times the problem pops up, and throughout the script. Basically, what I'm saying is, in the script itself, after you print it out, you want to mark down this is an issue, or I feel like this needs work because there's a plot hole, or the character's just not feeling right. But on another sheet, you want to mark that down in scene 7, header this. I recognize this issue, and the reason is because when you have it all compiled onto one sheet, you could recognize if it's consistent or if it's actually been fixed or solved, and you do that by taking note of the narrative, okay, against your notes. An example of some notes you should write out next to things are: this is too much exposition and needs to be cleaned up. The dialogue seems empty and without direction or character. I need to see this idea, quote unquote, or reveal this idea, quote unquote, earlier in the script to earn this moment. And that's basically like if I'm reading something about like if we're doing a fantasy movie and a character discovers that they're actually able to do a spell. Well, you want to see that they can't do the spell earlier, or you want to see how difficult it is to do that spell, even if it has nothing to do with that particular character. Just bring together the evidence that exists so you can create tension, conflict, resolve, etc., etc. Need my liquids. All right. If you run into any of those quick fix problems, this is the time to highlight it or tackle it now. Highlighting is okay. You could even color code it. I know some writers do that. They go, this is quick fix. I personally, if I'm doing it, I'll just put like red. Right. And then I know that when I'm going, I just look for the red, and then I just fix those. I don't even put, I know it's not going to take a lot of thought. Okay. And these are those minute issues, a bit of writing intuition mixed with a skilled craftsperson can fix anything that is quick, like basically just switch around some words. Maybe it's a little lengthy in dialogue, maybe whatever the case may be. Again, like action is just kind of over exploding, and you're like, let me concise that real quick. Because I like the action, but do I really need to go into, does he reach into his pocket and pull out something? Can he just pull out something? He pulls something out. that's in his pocket, right? Or whatever, Doesn't have to be every move. He stops, he stares, he looks, he thinks for a moment, then he grabs, he moves his arm into his pocket, he grabs the item and then pulls it out, looks at it like you don't. Let's clean that up. An example of something that might not be clear because it is unclear, like action lines or words, making the geography of a scene, character, or behavior seem off. Like for example, dialogue that doesn't feel quite right is another issue that can be fixed quickly. If you keep running into silly mistakes, typos, the name of a character keeps changing, who hasn't done that? Or the hidden skeleton remains of the abandoned ideas that just happen to be floating around in the current draft. Let me go over that real quick. So, so the unclear action lines or words making geography of a scene, characters, or behavior seem off. Basically, when you're reading a scene, if the action kind of makes it convoluted, like there's a lot of action but nothing is happening, or if it becomes disruptive of like what is the actual location, because a header might say they're in the master bedroom, but the action and dialogue might kind of not suggest that. You might want to suggest that. You might want to make sure that there's a coherent understanding between the two things, the header and the scene. Characters themselves could feel off. They could just, like, if it just feels like it's just one continuous character, but other people are saying the lines, but it doesn't feel that way, you want to adjust that. Behavior might be off. Like, just because you want someone to get into a fight doesn't mean that person would physically fight. They might just verbally fight, and you could work on that. Typos are pretty self-explanatory. Names, sometimes we're writing quick, or, in a final draft, if you write a name and then hit enter, it'll actually save that name. So now you might not even be thinking about it. You're just hitting the first letter, the name pops up, and now it's spelt wrong every time. So you have to go back in and fix it on your list and then go back. Just those are things you should be looking for that are quick fixes. When I say hidden skeleton remains of an abandoned idea, it basically means, like, let's say if in the first draft you were thinking about character A doing a subplot of XY, and then you realize halfway through the script you really weren't feeling that, and you just decided to abandon it completely, and you just didn't go back, or you didn't remember to go back, or you didn't take note to go back and take it out or adjust it in the first act, or even the ascending rise to the midpoint conflict. But from the midpoint conflict all the way to the resolve, it mentions nothing of it, which means that subplot doesn't get resolved. You want to take note of that and take it out of the equation. All right. You need to be hard on your scripts, okay? Being hard on your script is a good way to really attack the rewrite for the second draft, okay? The first thing I said for me is to do a cleanup right through. That's my pre-draft, is I'll just go through and clean it up. This is where I'll take out and let my mind add as I read through the script. At this stage, it's a quick rewrite, but not a analytical rewrite. It's just me kind of adding and subtracting as I see through. It's not me analyzing scenes, etc. An example would be that I'm just reading. It's like, Thomas says, I can't believe you decided to take that out. And then I'm like, or maybe it's direct where it's like, I can't stand you. And I'm like, that's so on point. How do I want that to be more subtexty. So, I might create attitude or energy in that. And that would be an example of me just doing the pre-draft run through. But after I do that, to be hard on my script, you have to get ready to potentially decrease the script size and where and when it feels bloated. You'll have to shrink scenes. You have to take scenes out sometimes. It's gonna be a part of the process. And at times you might want to also fix issues by adding more and more and more. And, sometimes it could benefit you, but at what cost? You have to think about it. If I'm going to add, where can I take away? If I'm going to take away, how do I clean up? How do I tighten? And, a diamond in the rough mentality is that way because it's not, your script hasn't been worked yet. And by cleaning it up and really cutting away some of the debris, you are creating a diamond. You're creating a really nice piece of work. All right. So you have to cut away and cut ruthlessly to find that diamond beautifully behind the rubble of your story, your meaty, padded story. What are some things you could cut? Well, in conversations, you might find a lot of single word back and forth. Can you cut that or add it to another line? Speaking of single words, you might be able to cut down on dialogue itself. Uh, what you have and clean it up. Take what you have and you clean it up a little bit. Shrink it down. Full lines of dialogue that seem long-winded could be shortened. Marlon Brando was notorious for doing that when he saw scripts. He would take these huge chunks of dialogue and then just be like, I'm really just saying this, or I could turn this into an action, and he would make it better. When you find your action beats longer than 4 lines, think about how you can condense them. What if you have 4 or 5 lines of action, a space, then 1 line of action? Is there a way to combine and shorten that? Mm-hmm. Is that action needed? Or is that action taking away from directing by being more of a blocking note and less of an action? Let me go into that. Sometimes in a script, if you're not directing it, and it's a script that you want someone else to direct, you don't need, like, he gets up from his chair, he walks over to the door, he opens the door. It could just be he answers the door. You don't have to have, he holds his chin in confusion, in wonder. Like, you don't have to do that. You're taking away action or choice from the actors, and you're taking away direction from the director. How do you want the scene to look? If what you write in the action doesn't have a theatrical story to it, doesn't have a theatrical presentation or have purpose to the story, just take it out. Let the director and the actors decide their choices and how it's going to look, unless how it's going to look affects the story and narrative, because the script is just the skeleton of a much bigger team, because it's writer, director, producer, cinematographer, art director, clothing department, hair, everybody is involved. The actor brings something to it. Your script is just the foundation of what others are going to use to build something bigger. And you have to be able to say, look, why am I giving action and direction? The action should be narrative. It should have some sort of purpose to it. It shouldn't just be like, he sits down on the chair. Like, but why? Unless he has to sit on the chair, or he falls apart. His day falls away from him as he collapses onto the chair. Oh, collapses on the chair. He's exhausted. We need to know that. That's narratively important then. But if it's like, he sits down, he looks at the person, he says, then he says his dialogue. He stands up, he walks past them, he gets a drink. Well, why did he do any of that? If none of that has purpose to the story and could be anything else, you don't need it necessarily. Because remember, this is not a novel, this is a script. Novels, you got to create the world and allow the imagination to flow. With scripts, it's a visual medium. So whatever's on the page has to be seen. So the action is a representation of what is seen to tell the story, and not necessarily like inner thought. Like, he thought to himself. Well, do we see his thoughts? Do we, he holds his chin. You don't need that. All right. One of the most painful realities for screenwriters is the mass delete. You might find yourself needing to cut an entire scene or scenes from your script, and you have to be willing to be hard on your script and accountable for cleaning it up. Because if you're going to be the one, you got to remember, you're biased. You love what you wrote, you understand what you wrote, and it matters to you. But does it matter to the story? One of your main jobs while doing this part of the stage, is to question every moment in the script. A script becomes so good when you're willing to destroy it to make sense of it. You have to be harsh on yourself. In fact, Good Will Hunting is an example of 10 years of Matt Damon and Ben Affleck working on a script and trying to sell it. Like, they weren't like, here's the first draft. No, they spent hours in the room going over the dialogue, acting out the dialogue, trying to make sense of the dialogue. There's a difference between just saying something and actually saying something. So you have to really put that kind of time in to make a great script. Does that mean like your first time through is not going to be great? It could be as a fundamental idea, as a once through where you're like, this is a great script. But now let me clean it up and actually make it great and solidify that. Because you need to truly make sense of a moment, whether it's an individual element or a scene, plot, etc. When it comes down to it, is that element absolutely needed? If not, get rid of it. A great writer knows that their first draft is not perfect. If you can believe that, then you'll understand that a lot of what made your first draft the first draft is expendable. I've seen it happen. Entire characters merged with other characters are thrown right out. Scenes that are repetitive or peripheral or even entire speeches you just poured your heart into become unnecessary when you give it a real deep analyzing look. I know how hard and how tough cutting up the thing you put your heart and soul into can be. I have struggles with it. But you own that script and you own it to you owe it to yourself to show this piece of art love that and the care that is deserving of a script that is going to be great, right? So that care and love comes in the form of molding it into something it was meant to be, not what you believe it was. And that's the thing, you have to be willing to look at your script and say, I know what it's supposed to be, and maybe it's not doing the thing I want it to do, so I have to give it that care, and I have to be willing to cut it up. Which leads us to analyze the through line. What's going to make your script a solid piece of writing work? Well, let's find out. What's going to make your script a solid piece of written work? Let's do it. When the heart of it clearly stands out and matches what you originally wrote the script for. One thing you could do before you start the rewrite is write out what you loved about the concept before you wrote your first draft. Moments that you wanted to see happen on the page, characters that came to life in you that needed to be written, and of course, beats that were going to drive the idea you came up with home. Write that on a separate piece of paper and see if those elements are in your script and stand out and work within your script. So now once you do that, go through the script, and when you reach a part, element, dialogue, character moment, etc., that really stood out, write that down too. When you get through the script, read these notes and ask yourself if this is the idea you first came up with. Ask yourself, did you capture the essence of what you originally set out to do? And of course, maybe, just maybe, during this process, you'll discover something else within your script, something new and different, and that's okay too. If I were you, now I would compare the new notes with that original list of things you wrote down about your story. See, the list I said to write out about what you were excited to write out, right? So after you look and compare these two lists from analyzing your story, you can use what you want to guide the cutting process. If it doesn't capture what made you want to write this script in the first place, or it doesn't serve the story you intended, then you can cut it out. I can tell you how often this will take time problems were solved after cutting stuff out. Things that feel like they are just happening create a lot of plot holes. Cleaning motivations and scenes up will have you trying to find where the plot hole was in the first place. And P.S., when all else fails, trim the fat and the heart of the story will reveal itself to you. Now, what I'm saying is, when you get to a scene and it just feels like things are happening, characters are saying things or reacting to things, but there's like no clear motivation, there's a really good chance that if you work on the motivations and you give purpose to what they do and do not do, say and do not say, the scene will come alive and really fix itself. It might even turn out that that scene isn't needed, or everything you put into it, you can start going back to other scenes and seeding information to lead to this moment. And how does this moment influence the other moments? Because it's hard to really get through a story where things are just happening. I need to do A for B to happen. All right, I did A, B happens. All right, now we're in the next scene. Now I need C to happen, so D will happen. Oh, I accomplished C. So Like that kind of story gets boring and monotonous. Nothing's really happening, but things are happening. It's just the characters' motivations are weird. You want A to happen so you can get to B, but because A happened, what happens to keep them from B? What is the consequence, good or bad, that allows them to move from A to B? Right? And then there's another way. So you have the first one is I did A, and now this happens, which keeps me from B. But then you have I did A, which rewards me B. And because I got that reward, what is the consequence that leaks into the rest of the story or leaks into the next scene? Those are things you have to think about, and it'll really help you. Which brings us to divide and conquer. All right. I do this thing where I break my stories into main and subplots through each character. As I read through my story, I copy and paste what I feel is plot, and I paste it into a column. And that's the thing. Like any subject matter that you really want to touch on, do that. Take it and really like analyze it. I'm a big fan of taking a scene and taking it out of the story and just putting it in its own document and just kind of like, how does this feel like a complete moment? Right? How am I in the middle of the moment? All right, that's good. It's good to be in the middle of the moment. Start in the middle, right? Like start in the movement of the scene. Don't start in the like, hey, how's it going? Pretty good. Come on in, right? Start in the movement of it. Is there a clear defined setup? Is there a clear defined conflict? Is there a clear defined resolution in this scene? And I'll do that. I'll analyze it that way. And more importantly, I might even do it. So I'll start off small. I'll go, let's look at characters. So I'll take one character and I'll analyze their involvement. And by the way, I might start with the most important character, the protagonist, and look at how they're talking and only look at how they're responding and talking and be like, is it consistent through the whole script? Then I'll go back and then my focus will be on another character, even though I already read their responses. But now my focus is they are the main focus. And I'll read them and I'll be like, is their voice consistent? But then I'll take a plot point and I'll do the same thing. I will literally cut out plot points. I'll say to myself as I'm reading, if Thomas walks into the room, hesitant. Tom has a hesitant energy to him as he walks into the room. He scans over, questioning the motivations of the three people in the room. One standing, one sits in the corner, and the other one is off to the right of the room. Slowly, he shuts the door, and then maybe the character says, "Is this because of Roger?" Right? Now I'll take that out and I go, oh, it's the subplot for this because he mentioned Roger. There's three people there. He's a little curious. He's bringing up information. He's concerned. He knows that he's done something to Roger, or Roger may think he did something and he knows about that. And he's like, he's going to retaliate. Is this the moment he's going to retaliate? So I put that subplot off to the side. And then through the conversation, they might be like, no, this has nothing to do with Robert. But we need to ask you some questions. There's been a disturbance over in Sector 6 of blank, 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 whatever. Now, Sector 6, that's a subplot. So I'll cut out that moment and I'll put it over there. And then I like to look at my list and I'll just see the plot points of every story kind of laid out. And I can say to myself, is something missing? Is something there? This is definitely a video that I'm going to do live. I'm going to do it in real time. As I continue to show people how I write my books and how I write stories, I'll actually show you how I pull out the plot lines and stuff. So keep an eye on that as well. All right, let's get right to the whole purpose of the rewrite, which is the second draft, writing the second draft. So once you do all your work and you're analyzing, this is the final step that leads us to the second draft. And any additional steps you personally would use, I would do it during this moment. It's your method. Do what you have to do. But take notes and begin writing. Take the notes that you did and all the analyzing and begin rewriting your second draft. Things to keep in mind while working on your second draft notes, before you take action to write it, you are not here to edit. This is not about proofreading, grammar, anything else that is going to change anyway at the very end. You're going to have to do that last. You will always have to proofread and deal with grammar. It's not important. Your goal is to make a coherent story. Real characters, real dialogue, real moments, real conflict, real resolutions. Grammar is literally the last step. Do not focus on that. Do not let it take you away from the purpose of what you're trying to do, which is write the second draft based on all of the analyzed notes. Writing the second draft is to take what you wrote in your first draft and make sure you hit all your plot points, all your beats, all your character moments. The dialogue is true to itself. The motivations are there. All the elements are on par. Does the story feel complete, or are you missing elements? Is something you should think about. And of course, another aspect of writing your second draft is to bring meat to the story while trimming fat. Meat doesn't mean to make it thicker, okay? Meat means that, like we said, is there a clear introduction? Is there a clear conflict? Is there a clear resolution? Or I should say introduction setting, right? Do the characters in the scene all have clear motivations? Is there more subtext, or is everything just straightforward? Is the scene just there so I can get character A to know about character B? If so, that scene either needs to be taken apart and mixed in with other scenes that have more purpose, or I need to add some meat, some value to that scene, while also taking off the fat, which is unnecessary stuff from hellos and goodbyes, what's up, how's it going, how's the mom, how's your dad, and also all the action stuff not making sense, right? Because remember, every inch of the page costs money in a script. All right. Now, I know it can be quite tempting to fix any errors, but I will repeat, leave it for the end, as it's a waste of time otherwise. I have in the past found myself being fixated on correcting typos and grammars. Just leave that for the final edit. This is really developmental editing and rewrites and, reconstruction, reorganizing. That's what your purpose of the second draft in a nutshell is you're doing a developmental edit. You're taking the mind dump of your train of thought first draft, and now you're really doing some more developmental editing, which brings us to the final thoughts. To sum up what second draft is, it's 3 stages. Stage 1 is reading through the book, through your script, while adding on I have a headache. All right. Stage 1 is reading through the book while adding on the fly, cleaning it up as you see it fit with the scenes, characters, and dialogue. Stage 2 should be where you reread it from the beginning while taking notes of what it is and what it is not in this draft. Basically, you're taking notes of what is in the draft and what is not in the draft. This is the work stage. And then stage 3 will be when you finally take the notes you have worked on and created and analyzed and basically write your second draft. It almost sounds like a second and third draft is happening, but in reality, the second draft is the read through and adding element. Then part of the second draft work is to go through and read what you have to see what is working, not working, missing, etc. Finally, taking those notes and spot checking the areas where you need to work on the second draft rewrite. The first part is a read and rewrite where you're adding new elements, thoughts, and cleaning things up on the fly because you've been away and you have a fresh eye to it. So you're just going to give it a fresh cleanup. Stage 2 is analyzing what you just did. And then stage 3 is the focus edit of your second draft. This is where you really go in deep and analyze it, and you start writing it out afterwards. Okay. This is probably my third favorite part of the process. Of course, hearing it read out loud by a table of performers is my second. Outlining and creating the story is my first favorite part of the process. Just so you know. Next video in the series is going to focus on step 8 on writing a script, which is reading through the script with another writer or two as you all take notes. Things we'll cover in that video. There's nothing like having a group of fellow writers you trust come in and help you break the script apart in real time. We'll go over what to look for, how to organize the read through, and what kind of questions you should be asking them. Or what you should ask them to look for before the reading begins, meaning like what kind of notes or a direction will you give them before we even get into the reading process? Question. What's your favorite part of the process of writing a script? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you liked what you watched and you've not done so already, please subscribe by hitting the bell icon and the subscribe so you don't miss out. All right, there you go. That's it. I guess I'll do the thing, right? And as always, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Thanks again. Outro.